Hey, yo, what is going on, guys? Got a brand new episode of Buy or Bust for you today. We're going to be talking about Mr. Fantastic again, but it is Zombie Mr. Fantastic. It might just be the card of the season, but that maybe is a spoiler. Maybe it's not. Anyways, we're going to be going over the good and the bad for this card, 3 separate decks, as well as the floor and the ceiling. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So in case you guys did not know, Zombie Mr. Fantastic is the brand new Series 5 card that is releasing on Tuesday. That is a 2-cost, 2-power card with 2 abilities. First ability is On Reveal, Horde +2, meaning if there's no Horde on the board, you add the Horde to the board and it gets 2 power. Case in point, simple that, On Reveal, boom, Horde already started. And then additionally, Activate, give 4 of your created cards plus 1 power. That is 4 individual cards. It cannot hit the same card multiple times. So definitely keep that in mind. And this is actually what it looks like in game for you guys. This card is very interesting. You know, we now have 3 different Mr. Fantastics. I guess essentially we have 4, including the Grand Arena one. But this card's got a lot of different options as we do go ahead and jump right into some of the key synergies for this card. First synergy we're thinking of, Victoria Hand's getting another card that is really good for her decks. Because, you know, Victoria Hand is really good with created cards. This does not just say created cards in hand, of course, for Zombie for Mr. Fantastic. I almost said First Steps because we're so used to Pedro. But ZMF, as you all might want to say, it works with cards on the board, works with cards in hand, meaning cards created in hand. The cards have to be on the board in order to get power from the activate ability. But just key synergy right there. Next, of course, we're going to have Jocasta, the activate ability, being able to activate and give your created cards plus 1 power. You know, 4 of them plus 1 power. Being able to do that twice seems pretty good. I mean, going from a 2-2, adding a Jocasta makes it, you know, that's kind of like a 5-5 in a sense, right? A 5-5 plus 8 seems pretty good. 5-13's pretty solid. Of course, you probably would have other activates on that same side or in that lane as well with the Jocasta. Just, you know, kind of keeping that in mind. A lot of just really interesting stuff I think you can do with that. Maybe some new activate style deck, or you plug this into the already activate style deck. Of course, you're already going to have 1 created card on the board, meaning the Horde, unless your opponent like destroys it or something. So you at least are always going to have 1 card for Zombie Mr. Fantastic to be able to hit. And next, of course, we have Thanos. Yes, Thanos. Because these stones are created cards, Zombie Mr. Fantastic can also add power to those stones. So just kind of keep that in mind. Don't be surprised if you see more Thanos this next week, if you haven't already seen the good bit already, because I feel like people are already running like 30, 37 card Monty right now. So why not add even more to the mix, right? Next, of course, we are going to have some of these key counters. Red Guardian, this is a 2-2, so Red Guardian can target this because it's going to have kind of a lower power point in its lane. Of course, you can kind of play around that and play this maybe in a lane that already has a card that has less power, so it is not a target for Red Guardian. Also, Super Adaptoid, because the On Reveal already goes off, of course, Cosmo can counter Zombie Mr. Fantastic from creating the Horde, but you also have Super Adaptoid to remove that activate ability so you don't get that +1 to those 4 created cards. If people are running Super Adaptoid, that is, I'm just saying this is one of those counters, not necessarily a card you're going to be seeing a whole lot, but maybe this week you might. And then, of course, we have Lady Deathstrike. We have 2 cards actually at this 5-7 stat line that I'm referring to. Lady Deathstrike, this card has 3 or less power because it's a 2-powered card. Lady Deathstrike can destroy it. And, of course, Cosmic Ghost Rider. We kind of have that similar in vein with the Red Guardian, but Cosmic Ghost Rider is another one of those cards that can shut off this card's ability if it is one of the first 2 cards in a lane. And then let's move along to the good for this card. So starting off first and foremost, it is a 2-cost with incredible upside. Incredible upside, what do you mean? It creates the Horde on the board, which is +2. So it's a 2-2 +2, so it's a 2-4. And then it has the potential when you activate it on your created cards to give 4 power to 4 of the cards on the board. So essentially a 2-8 potential. Ceiling, it has the potential to be a 2-8. I think that's pretty good, so I think that's some incredible upside. It's a 2-cost card, you know. You also have 2 abilities that aren't necessarily the easiest to counter, meaning Cosmo, of course, can stop the Horde, Stardust can stop the Horde, but you're playing this on turn 2, more often than not, that's before Cosmo, and that's before Stardust. So you have that going for you. Of course, later on in the game, they can turn off the activate, potentially with a Cosmic Ghost Rider, Red Guardian, Lady Deathstrike, but they have to really be super specific and kind of spend their turn more often than not in some of those cases at like in that lane trying to disable the activate. So it's not, that's what I'm saying, it's a little bit harder to counter in that sense. So this can really help you scale pretty, horizontally, which I do like with this card. And then there's a large variety of created cards, whether it is on board, whether it is in hand, whether it is in deck. Created cards are what gets the power. So you have Zombie Mr. Fantastic to be able to kind of elevate and add value there. And, as the season progresses, you're going to get more Horde cards. We're also going to get more cards, coming out next season and stuff too. Like, any cards that create tokens or just add value to something like this allows you to kind of just get just craziness. Like the Horde with maybe something like a Superior Spider-Man next season also would enable you to be able to get that extra, energy going forward. But that's a spoiler, super spoiler for, next season when we do buy or bust for that. But let's go ahead and we talk about the bad for this card as well. Because as we progress, it is a 2/2, so it does have a low base power, meaning, like I said, for counters like that Red Guardian and something for, like, a Lady Deathstrike, to be able to destroy that is something that can happen. Danger also can destroy this card because it is less than 6 power for Danger. It's a potentially bad late draw, if you don't have the board space, or if you don't have Jocasta to be able to get that activate off. So it would just be a 2/2, potentially a 2/4 if you have the board space, of course, to make the void, not the void. I say the void, but to make the horde, make the horde on the board. And then, of course, horde decks right now aren't in the greatest spot. I think after this week, when we also do get the introduction of the hunger, maybe that can help that archetype, but this isn't necessarily just for zombie decks. Like, this is for a larger variety of decks than zombie decks. Of course, it's a great beneficiary to zombie decks, but like I said, they're not in the best spot right now. And then it can only hit separate created cards, like I was saying too. It cannot hit the same one multiple times unless you have Jocasta. Then it has an opportunity to hit the same card twice, just because that's 2 different activates. But per activate, you can only hit a card 1 time. It does not hit the card multiple times. So keep that in mind. If you have 1 created card on the board, you're only getting +1 power to that card, not +4 to that power, to that card. Now, as we move on to the floor and the ceiling for this card, on the very low end, the floor of this card is a late draw and you can't activate it, or there's literally no space on the board for your Horde. So you just don't get any value. You just get any value out of Zombie Mr. Fantastic. But I think the medium kind of baseline over here is going to be creating at least 1 to 2 cards on the board. You're pretty much almost guaranteed to create at least 1 card on the board, that being the Horde from Zombie Mr. Fantastic. So you're at least guaranteed to be able to be a 2/5 because you get +1 power onto the Horde and +2 power onto the Horde on reveal and +1 with the activation. But if you get 2 of those, like you have 2 created cards on the board, this essentially is a 2/2 plus the 2 power of creating the Horde, and then plus the 2 additional power from adding 1 power to your other created cards. And at the absolute peak of this card, by itself, this is, play down curve, you create the Horde, then you have 3 other created cards on the board, so you get that +2 from creating the Horde, and then you get +4 because you add 1 power to each of your other created cards on the board as well, making this essentially that 2/8 we're talking about. And then, of course, with Jocasta, that makes this by itself, if you're not including Jocasta, it would be like a 2/12 seems pretty good, but like with Jocasta, that's why I'm saying like 5/15, because in general, like that's 2 cards. That's a 2-cost card and a 3-cost card. I'm adding the cost together. But like that's a like crazy combo potential you have with like Jocasta, but by itself can have the potential to be like a 2/8, which is pretty good. All right, let's talk about these decks over here. The first deck I have over here is going to be Undead Hands, which is a Victoria Hand style list with Zombie Mr. Fantastic. Kind of just plugging this into the Victoria Hand style deck. Having Cosmic Ghost Rider for some of this tech against all of this end of turn shenanigans is kind of the thought process there. Having Prodigy for a bunch of different options here. Mainly having Prodigy for something like a Victoria Hand or even the Zombie Mr. Fantastic, because then you can also get that to proc again. Of course, this is a bad thing to do on a later turn. Like doing this on turn 6, you're not going to get value, but doing this on like turn 5, you can have 2 Zombie Mr. Fantastics going into turn 6, which allows you to get +8 power across the board on created cards. Seems pretty nice. You have Bastion to make some of these created cards as well. You also have the Horde on the board at least. The Horde will also get an additional +2 from Prodigy going onto Zombie Mr. Fantastic. Since it copies the entirety of the text, that would be an additional +2 onto the Horde right there just from that Prodigy interaction. And then, of course, getting copies of Victoria Hand seems pretty good. Getting maybe even copies of Demons, getting Mirages, like Iron Patriots and stuff. You're creating a bunch of cards here. You have Quench It to discount them. And then you have ways to make those honor reveals potentially just go off again. I bet if you Misery Zombie Mr. Fantastic, it would destroy Zombie Mr. Fantastic since it has that on reveal locked in, so kind of just keep that in mind. Unless you maybe are trying to activate into then Misery to just buff up your Horde. Maybe you're trying to get Horde value. I think that probably is a weird niche line, but that is something you could potentially do. Maybe if the Horde's on like a Sanctum Sanctorum, or it's on a kiln and you need to get more power over there, you could do something like that, but probably aren't doing that if we're being honest here. But the next deck we have over here is going to be... yeah, we got Zombified Thanos over here, which is kind of like a newer rendition of Thanos tech. Of course, you're not wanting to... I mean, you want created cards on the board, right? For Mockingbird value. But you're also eating created cards here with Strange Supreme. You're doing that after they potentially got an additional power from your Zombie Mr. Fantastic in order to give an even bigger Strange Supreme. You're tucking this card behind your Cosmo. You also have Merlin. Merlin turning cards into other cards with Polymorph, makes them created cards, which allows your Zombie Mr. Fantastic to buff those. You are trying to get potentially even into a Wiccan Curve to be able to hit some of these combos maybe a little bit differently, or just having more energy to be able to mitigate some of the stuff your opponent's doing. Of course, if you create the Horde on the board, Strange Supreme does also eat the Horde because that is a created card. So just kind of keep that in mind in this style list, but I think this is definitely going to be something people mess around with. If it's not this, like a version similar to this, like I don't think this is necessarily the set 12, just kind of what my head went to kind of have a variety of 12 cards or like a kind of tech version of Thanos makes sense. But I think this definitely will be a kind of home for Zombie Mr. Fantastic. And then next, of course, we're going to have Zombie Slam. So it's very similar, kind of like the Slam list that we had last week, but this time we are using Zombie Mr. Fantastic. We, of course, have all of these token cards that can be created, whether they're Mysterios, which are token cards, which are created cards. The main Mysterio itself, the one that has the 4 base power, does not get the buff from Zombie Mr. Fantastic, but the other 2 Mysterios should get the buff, as well as Kate Bishop's arrows. You also have anything, like I said, Merlin polymorphs into something else, would also get the benefit of power from Zombie Mr. Fantastic as well. You're playing a bunch of cards to get Sasquatch value. You also have Merlin, like I said, to potentially put cards back into your deck to get extra energy to mess stuff around. You have Hope to have extra energy. You're slamming a bunch of stuff to have Monkey, Mockingbird, and Sasquatch as some of your big cards to be able to get extra value at the end of the game. And you also have Gwenpool in order to buff some of these cards as well. Which moves us over to our final thoughts here for Zombie Mr. Fantastic. I do think this card is going to be strong. I do think it's going to be fairly flexible, too. I don't think it's just a Horde card or just a Victoria Hand card. I mean, not even just a Thanos card. I think you could use this, like Rez said in his video, in some Shield-style decks. You can use this potentially in Zoo, because Zoo is creating cards. Of course, Zoo maybe is not in the best spot, especially with Destroy running rampant right now with all the head pull stuff. But there's definitely options to do things with this card, besides just the ones I've listed, which I think that is very nice when it comes to a new card like this. Of course, it benefits the Horde archetype as well, giving another enabler for the Horde, giving it the created power with that +1, and then starting the Horde off with that +2. So, like, there is options there. I don't necessarily think this card gets adjusted. Of course, 2-cost new cards are some of the cards that do get adjusted more often than not, because when they come out with 2-cost cards, normally they are really good. So maybe they do adjust this and it goes to 3 created cards, or maybe he Zombie gets hit on base power, it goes to a 2-1, but I don't really see that happening anytime soon if that does happen. So just kind of, keep that in mind. This also would work with a Werewolf by Night. Werewolf, this isn't on reveal. It's a good thing for a Werewolf there. So there's definitely options, I think, with this card, something to just kind of note and think about there, which makes me think you should totally buy this card. I do think this is probably the best card of the season. So if this is something that you're very interested in, and if I were to suggest any card of the season, it would probably be Zombie. Zombie Mr. Fantastic would probably be the main card. I mean, we're going to go over the rest of the cards, but I think this is the one for sure that'd be this is probably the card to get. I think this card is going to be very solid. I think it's going to have a bunch of different options. I think you're going to see it in a variety of different decks. I think this card is going to do well. So I would just keep that in mind. And then if you aren't interested into any of the created card stuff, or if you're not into any of the Horde stuff, then don't get the card. Skip on it yourself. Because at the end of the day, guys, we're all playing Marvel Snap to have fun. Our resources we have in this game are very limited. We do not have access to be able to get a plethora of resources, especially now with so many cards coming out each and every season. We got to really think about how we want to spend our resources so we can get the cards we truly want to play. Being collection complete is nice, yes, so then you don't really have to worry about, I'm not missing this card for this deck that is spraying up into the meta. But at the end of the day, don't you want to make sure you can guarantee you can get the cards you really want to play for the styles of decks you really enjoy? You know, because this is a game. We're supposed to be having fun. You know, we're supposed to be using this to take a break, take a step away from life. Life may be stressed out or something, you know? But at the same time, you know, me and other content creators, we could be totally wrong about these cards. We haven't had any access to be able to test these cards. We're just theory crafting. You know, we're just kind of giving ideas to you guys to help you guys potentially make even way better decks than we have made. But trying to give you guys some of those like details to kind of like understand the mechanics and how they work and what they maybe work good with, what they get countered by. So if you maybe don't even want to get the new card, you can counter the new card and have fun ruining everyone else's fun for playing the new card. But, you know, cards get nerfed and buffed all the time, too. We have an OTA and a patch this next week, so who knows what's going to happen in the meta. Hopefully something happens to end of turn. Or maybe not. Who knows? I think the meta still is fairly open right now. Yes, some of these decks are kind of feels bad. It's like I'm building a bigger sandcastle than you. But, you know, you don't have to build a sandcastle. You can also kind of maybe push their sandcastle a little bit, you know, 1 to 2 tech cards. You don't have to have a whole deck of tech cards, but maybe you do. If you want to have a whole deck of tech cards, hey, that's how you want to have fun? Okay. I don't like that, but I mean, that's what you like, so it is what it is. But I want to say thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you guys did stick around to the very end, let me know down below. What do you guys think about Zombie and Mr. Fantastic? Do you think I am right? Do I think this is going to be the best card of the season? Or do you think this card is actually just completely mid and I'm entirely wrong? But anyways, we are so close to 4,000 subscribers. Maybe we hit it by the time this video is posted. But I want to say thank you guys so much for all the love and support. You guys have been incredible. Hopefully you guys have a great either day if you guys are in the Golden Gauntlet right now, probably around the time that this is going live, or if you are watching people in the Golden Gauntlet, support it. There are Twitch drops for the Golden Gauntlet as well, only live on the main channel during the Golden Gauntlet, so definitely check that out on Twitch, on Marvel Snap's main Twitch. And definitely follow me on Twitch too. If you guys want to follow me on Twitch, that's where I do almost daily streams for Marvel Snap. That's where you guys will see some of these deck guides and everything too. But yeah, it's been real. God bless, and Tucker out.